Hi everyone, my name is Shayna Partlow and I'm a Career Services Consultant with the Center for Career Opportunities. I'm here to talk to you today about 5 things you need to know about interviewing. So let's go ahead and jump in. So the first thing that we want to talk about is just kind of the process of an interview. Interviews are sometimes a lot and they can be really overwhelming, but it's something that you've kind of already been practicing. So if you think about a test or an exam, that's something that you really have to prepare for. So you go to class, you take notes, you maybe rewrite your notes or you study. You're going to take some of those same steps as you're getting ready for your interview. Okay, so there's the prep, there's follow-up that goes on after, there's the actual interview, all those things that you're going to be doing. Okay, then there's the actual purpose of the interview. A lot of times people think, oh, the purpose is just to get the job. But there's a little bit more than that. So you really want to show why you're a good fit for the company. But then this is also your chance to actually interview the employer. So do they fit your goals? Do you see yourself thriving there? Starting to look and see what is going to be good for you in this environment. And then also practicing. Interviews are not something you want to wing. You really want to practice that. So, revise your elevator pitch, kind of think about that question. Tell me about yourself. That's probably the one question that you will almost always get in any interview. And so making sure that you've prepared that question, but also looked ahead and thought about what examples from my resume or my career do I want to share with this employer. So let's talk a little bit more about the prep for the interview, because that is something that's going to set you up for success. The first thing that I would suggest is researching the organization. So whether that's a company, a school that you're looking to get into, organization, whatever that may be, you really want to research them and learn more about them. You don't want to ask a question that you would have known if you had just Googled the organization. So looking at the mission statement, what are some of their goals? Have they been in the news lately? How have they reacted to being in the news? Different things like that, just starting to look up the company. Also, the next thing you want to do is really review your materials. So that's your resume that you use to apply for the job, the cover letter, any other things that you may have submitted with your application materials, and make sure you're understanding your experiences and what they are wanting in the position that you're applying for. So connecting the experiences that you've already had and showing how that prepares you for what they're looking for. And then the last thing that you want to do is make sure you create questions to ask the employer. So at the end of the interview, once they finish asking you their questions, they're going to turn to you and say, what questions do you have for us, or what questions do you have for me? And that's where you need to ask them some questions. And this is your chance to interview them, making sure that you don't just ask questions that are yes or no, but giving them the time to really sell their company to you, but also give you more information so you can make an informed decision. And there are several types of interview questions that you could be asked. The first one is just verification questions, making sure that the things you've written in your resume are actually accurate. So it could be asking about different skills that you have, certifications that you've maybe gotten through classes or otherwise, and just making sure that your resume is matching up with what you're actually saying. Some of the other ones is then personal traits. So the biggest example that I can think of for this one is strengths and weaknesses. So they may ask you a question, tell me your top 3 strengths, tell me your top 3 weaknesses. And there's a lot of different strategies for answering those questions, which for sure talk with your career coach, but then also make sure that you're practicing these questions beforehand. Then they will ask you some questions about overall fit. So why do you want to work at this position company? Or they might even ask you some other questions like, how do you find fun? Or how do you make things more fun if they're a company that's trying to focus on that aspect? And then the last type of question is in those behavioral questions, which I'll talk about in a little bit more in a moment. But those are the questions that ask, tell me about a time when X, or tell me at a time when you had to deal with a conflict with a team member, how did you act? So those are some of the questions that you'll really want to prepare for. Let's talk more about those behavioral questions. How do you answer them? So one really great way to kind of set yourself up for success is by using the STAR method. The STAR method, when you break it down, is called situation, task, action, result. So to start off, you want to talk about what was the situation that you were in. So for this one, they say, I was an event planning intern, and this is what I did. And then the task is, what were they tasked with? Like, what if you're talking about a group project, what are you trying to solve? If you're talking about conflict, what is the conflict? Just giving them that kind of background information so that the interviewers know exactly what you're trying to talk about. The next part is then the action. So what action did you personally do? Even if you're on a team in this scenario, you need to focus on the things you did because you were the one in the interview. And then the last thing is in the result. So what result came about from the action? And if you can tell, just even looking at the links of these different types, the result is where you want to spend the most of your time because you're talking about the impact that you made on the company, your team, the class, whatever it may be. Okay, so I'll give you some time to kind of review these things. But again, just remember you want to have the situation, task, action, and result. And that's one way that you can kind of practice some of these questions when they ask about a time when you had a conflict, when you had to deal with a supervisor, anything like that. All right, so the last thing I want to talk about is just the etiquettes of interviewing. And this will relate to interviews in person, virtually, or even on the phone. Okay, these are all things that you want to make sure you're aware of. And the first is timelines. So, this might be more in person and not being late, but also being sure that if you're having a phone interview or virtual interview, that your technology is set up and ready to go before they call you so that you don't have to go through those technical issues that would cut into your interview. If you're going somewhere, I usually recommend getting there at least 10 minutes before because you don't want to be there 30 to an hour before because that puts the employer in a little bit of a tough spot. But 10 to 15 minutes is kind of the sweet spot. The next thing is you want to make sure you're dressed professionally. And this is even if it's virtual, on the phone, in person, making sure that you are dressed the part. And we have a lot of different resources to give you ideas on what that could look like. But the other thing that I want to mention is make sure that it's comfortable. Okay, so you don't want to be sitting in this crazy thing that you've never worn before and constantly messing with your outfit. Make sure it's professional and comfortable so that you can actually focus on the interview. The next thing is actually writing thank you notes. So this is something that I would recommend doing for all of your interviews and sending it within 24 hours. This can be email, it can be handwritten, it's kind of up to you. But if you have terrible handwriting, please don't write a thank you note. That's not something that's going to help your case if they can't read it. But then also thinking through, is the recruiter going to multiple different locations that they're not going to get a handwritten note? So thinking through that kind of process. But just the importance of sending a thank you note, including some personal aspects from the interview, and then also just ending it and reiterating your interest in the position. Finally, I want to leave you with some resources that you can use to better prepare you for interviews. The first one is called Big Interview, and it's an online interviewing tool. What it is a pre-recorded interview. A person comes up, they ask you a question, you get about 5 seconds, and then your camera turns on and you respond. So it's a way to just kind of practice in more of that real life scenario, as well as you can then send those interviews to other people and get their feedback on what you could do better the next time. You can also schedule a mock interview with the CCO, as well as be sure to check out our website and our handbook as we have lots of other resources as well. In the handbook, we actually have a page that's just full of interview questions that you can use to practice. In regards to company research, the Career Research Portal as well as Glassdoor are really great tools. Career Research Portal is basically a collaboration of a ton of different websites that you can use to find information about financials, when certain companies were in the news, and so forth. Glassdoor has more of that company culture piece where you can learn more by reviews and other information about salary. But one of the best ways to kind of learn more about companies is to network with your contacts or even make new contacts within your specific industry because they'll be able to tell you more information about the specific company, the industry, how interviews may differ from other industries, and kind of give you that inside look. If you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to us. You can make an appointment with a career advisor or even email us at askcco@purdue.edu. Thanks.